Hello, I'm Beverly Payne, and this is Payne&Simple Makes. Today we're going to make an etched tile sign. We're also going to use a little bit of vinyl. I've got links below to a post with all the supplies that you need for this project. The first thing I'm going to do for our etched tile and vinyl project is to open Cricut Design Space and start a new project. I go to the Shapes menu and choose the square. I adjust the size of that square so that it's the same size as my tile. In this case, it's about 4 inches tall and about 12 inches wide. I change the shade of the color to a light gray, and that's just to give me a template or a visual to help me with lining everything up. You don't need this rectangle, but it's nice to have. Next, it's time to add our text. I choose the impact font for our background text because it's a strong and substantial font. I'm doing an Easter tile, so I type the word Easter in the impact font. And I'm going to enlarge it until it fits nicely on my tile again. You can see I just stretch it. I just grab that handle in the lower right and stretch it. So you don't want to take the text all the way to the edge because Cricut had some limitations on how big you can cut on a 12 by 12 mat. I just play around with the size and the spacing. When I have that the way I like it, I add my smaller text, and in this case it's going to be "He is risen." I want a script font for this text, so I'm going to use "I love glitter," tried and true there. I use the keyboard shortcut for the swirly lines, and I type in "He is risen," and I add another swirly at the end. And it's typing in over top of Easter, but I'm going to move that so I can manipulate this text a little bit more. And I'm going to change the color and go with a nice spring green. And that gives me some good contrast as well. So you can see that the script type font, that the letters do not connect. So I'm going to use the letter space adjustment, clicking on the down arrow and moving my letters until they touch. This works pretty well, but there are always some letters that won't touch by doing this method. So once I get as many as possible touching, then I go to Advanced and Ungroup to Letters. And I'm going to adjust the letters that aren't touching so that I can get them connected and we have a nice script. So I'm just checking out what actually is touching and what's not. I have to enlarge a little bit so that I can make sure I know I can see what I'm doing. Looks like the word risen, the R and the I are touching, so I can group them and move them as one unit. So I move that I move the E a little closer to the H, and I'm going to move the S a little closer to the I. The whole time I move these letters, I'm holding down my control key, and that's to kind of keep everything on the same plane so I don't get some letters up and some letters down below. So I'm checking out that final swirl there, making sure that it's touching. I just want to make sure that I get everything connected. It's not really necessary, but it just makes it a little easier. And I personally think it looks a lot better. I mean, it looks like real script there, real cursive writing. So when I like the way everything looks, I select all and I weld, and that gets everything back as one unit. And then I can move that script text on top of my big text, on top of Easter, You want to make sure that everything aligns correctly, but I'm going to stretch. I'm going to size first. So I'm stretching out "He is risen" so that it covers the entire word. I'm going to move it up above. And then I'm going to check. I might need to stretch it a little bit more, but I'm going to check my alignment. So I'll select both the small text and the big text, so both Easter and "He is risen." And I'm going to choose Align, Center horizontally, and choose Align again, and then choose Center vertically. And that way I know that "He is risen" is aligned or centered both horizontally and vertically. Cricut recently added an offset function to Design Space, and I'm anxious to use it. If you remember on our last tile project, we had to duplicate our small text several times and play with arranging it in order to make our knockout. The offset function should eliminate all those steps. And I just used the default, and oh my goodness, it works. It's great. You can see that it does eliminate all those steps. So I'm going to move my design out of the way, and then I can remove all the pieces that we knocked out. So there is my Easter with the "He is risen" knocked out, and you can see that I've got the little pieces left over, so I just delete those because I don't need them. I'm going to delete that background tile now because I don't need it to help me design. Alright, so just so that I can make sure and see one more time that it's centered and is going to look okay, I go and center horizontally and vertically again. So when you're ready, you're going to choose Make It in the upper right hand corner of Design Space. So I just sort of check out each piece. Each mat, that's the Easter mat. And then I look at the "He is risen" mat. And I click Continue, make sure that it's connected to my maker. Now the word Easter is what we're going to etch into our tile. So we're going to be using stencil vinyl. I've not used that before, so I'm going to have to browse all my materials. I do a search for stencil vinyl. And when it comes up, I click on it. I keep the pressure to default. I use the fine tip. And I cut it out. And then for "He is risen," I'm just going to use the regular vinyl setting. Excuse me. Okay, I am not a quick weeder. It takes some time for me to weed this project. That's okay if you're like me, just take your time. This stencil vinyl seems like it tears very easily, so it's important to take your time and make sure you get the right pieces out. I don't make stencils very often, so I have to pay really close attention to what I'm doing. We want to remove the letters in the word Easter. This is the opposite of what we typically do, right? We usually want to keep those letters. Do you see that I'm using the back of my hand to put on my little scrap pieces of vinyl? How many of you do that? I don't have one of those cute little rings that some people wear and they can stick their little pieces in there. So this process does take a little while, but you want to make sure you're getting the right pieces up and that you aren't removing the parts that you need. And it, like I said, it's the opposite of what I typically do with vinyl, because I don't make stencils very much. And you can see the tile that I'm going to use there. This is a different tile, a different type of tile than what we used in the last project. The last project we utilized just a basic white tile, and this is a basic tile too, but it's not white, it's not that solid color, it's actually a glass tile, which is why it works well for this etching project. Etching Cream works on glass. Okay, so my weeding is coming along a little bit. I appreciate your patience. I probably should have sped this part of the video up or just cut some of this out. Sometimes I think it's important though to see all the parts, see the whole process, especially for beginning crafters. Video is not my natural media. Alright, so I have that weeded, and I'm going to go ahead and clean my tile, and I just use rubbing alcohol, and I just give it a good cleaning with that rubbing alcohol on the paper towel, nothing fancy. And before I go on, I'm going to just finish up all the weeding that we have to do with this project. So we just have this one other piece. I'm weeding the script text, and because the I Love Glitter font is so thin, sometimes weeding it can be a little bit tedious and a little bit tricky sometimes. It does seem to get easier though the more I work with I Love Glitter and vinyl. Again, you just want to try to be really careful. Make sure that you don't pull up any of the pieces that you need. And of course, this is the opposite of what we were just doing with the Easter stencil, right? Because now we do want to get rid of all the vinyl that is not text. We need that text to stay because we're going to apply that vinyl straight to the tile in that knocked out space. And I'm trying to pull this off at an angle, and that's not something I'm really skilled at yet, but I'm working on it. And because this text is so thin, it is wanting to come up a little bit off of that backing. So I'm using my left hand a lot of times to try to keep that vinyl down. You can see right here it's wanting to come up, while I'm pulling at that angle with my right hand. Again, just go, if you're new to vinyl, if you're new to weeding, you just want to go slowly. And sometimes I get impatient. I have to admit, I get impatient and I'll go too fast, and then I rip something or lose a piece or something like that. But just go slowly, and you'll be okay. Alright, so we finish up our weeding, and we're going to put our transfer tape on the back of that, or on top of that backing, on top of the vinyl. And I'm just going to put that to the side. Now we're ready to apply our Easter stencil, and we can get ready to etch after that. So I'm just kind of lining this up. I'm going to cut off the end of this stencil because that extra piece there could end up causing me to make a mistake a little bit later on. So I'm just going to cut it off. And I'm just sort of eyeballing this, trying to center it up both vertically and horizontally, getting it sort of fixed in my head. That helps. I carefully peel off that backing, and I try not to tear anything. Again, the stencil vinyl is a little bit different. It's a little bit difficult to get the corner started there, but once I do, it comes off pretty easily. And you do want to start on the corner, and I'm sorry you can't see this very well. I didn't realize that my hands had moved out of the camera area. A note for future videos: make sure hands stay in the camera area. So you want to just slowly and gently pull that backing off. And again, it works better if you can go at an angle. I know that's easier said than done sometimes. So I've got a little piece that we're going to have to add back in, and that's all right. You usually have to do that with projects. All right, time to apply it. So I'm just going to put it down on top of the tile, centering it as best I can. And then I'm going to work from the center out to the edges. So I have a few wrinkles on the right side of my stencil, so I use my weeding tool to try to smooth those out. It's important to make sure that all the edges adhere really well. You don't want to have any of that etching cream run up underneath the edges of your letters. If you do, they're not going to be nice and crisp, which is what we want. We want that etched to be nice and crisp. Alright, I need to put the center of the R back in. That was the piece. See, it wasn't attached to anything, and that's why it floated off by itself. So I'm going to use my tweezers, and I'm going to put that R back in the center, aligning it the way it was originally. So I just put it down. I can't really do too well aligning it with my fingers, so I've got to use those tweezers to get it placed just the way it needs to be. All right, let's etch. But first, we got to think about safety, right? So you need to make sure that you wear rubber gloves while you do this. So put on your rubber gloves. We do not want to get etching cream on our skin. And it's also a good idea to wear safety glasses as well. So gloves and glasses, you should be okay. You do want to be in a well-ventilated area though. So I'm just using Armor Etch and a stencil brush. A stencil brush, the bristles are a little more stubby, and that's because you're dabbing, and that's important. You want to use a stencil brush and you want to dab on the etching cream. You want to apply a thick coat, and apply that thick coat in the spaces left by the stencil, so it's actually the letters. We removed all the vinyl from those letter spaces, so that's where you're etching, and you're just dabbing it on, but you want it pretty thick. You do not want to use that brush stroke. In other words, you don't want to go back and forth. And the reason is because you could accidentally brush some of that etching cream up underneath the stencil, and if you do that, again, you're going to end up with a not a crisp line. You're going to be able to see the bleed, and that's not what we want to do. Again, just take your time, dab it on, dab that etching cream on thickly. Another thing you want to be careful of is to make sure you don't get any of that etching cream on the outside of the stencil, around the edges of your tile. And you can see that my stencil doesn't cover the entire tile, and that's something you can think about too when you're cutting yours. You might want to make sure that it does cover it. So the directions said to let the etching cream sit for 1 to 3 minutes. I set my timer for 3 minutes because I wanted a good etch on my tile. At the end of the lapsed time, wash the tile completely. You want to rinse it really well, remove all that etching cream, and do this with your gloves on. Don't take those gloves off. Then you want to remove the stencil, making sure to remove all those little bits. Can you see the etching as I remove more and more of the stencil? I can see where it has etched those letters, and it looks really nice. I'm kind of excited about this. So once I get all those pieces of the stencil off, it's time to apply the script vinyl. So I get my piece of script, it's on my transfer tape. I have to take a look at this etching again just to see. Yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. But I get my script tile, I get my script vinyl, and I've got to get that alignment fixed in my head. So I sort of eyeball it. I'm going to peel off the backing. I'm going to peel off the backing, and I'm going to fold the edges of the transfer tape so that I can better see where it needs to be placed. And that's kind of a tip, is to fold that or roll your transfer tape up so you can kind of see better where things need to go. It just helps with that alignment so much, I think. So just roll those edges up. It makes it a lot easier. Once you have figured out where you want it, go ahead and put it down. You want to work again from the center, pressing from the center out to the edges, out to the sides. And once you get it down, you want to take your scraping tool and you want to burnish. So burnish, burnish, burnish. Make sure you get a good adherence there. You want it stuck really well. And when you do, peel off the transfer tape, and yay, you've got a great new Easter sign. I'm so excited. I've got a great new Easter sign for my mantle. So what type of sign will you etch? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to come on over to beverlypayne.com and get all my posts and join my maker library for all my tutorials, patterns, and other resources. Please hit like below and subscribe. Thanks for watching.